The deed I signed with love. The house wasn't just bricks and walls. It was the cradle of my memories. The place where my husband and I painted the nursery pale yellow, where David took his first steps on the old hardwood floor. It was where we hosted birthday parties with paper hats and barbecue smoke drifting into the neighbor's yard. It was where I kissed scraped knees and read bedtime stories that made little eyes flutter shut. I never thought I'd leave it, especially not like this. My name is Margaret Eleanor Hart. I'm 72 years old, and I used to believe that giving everything to your child was the purest form of love, until that love was used against me. It started a few years ago when my health began to slip. Nothing dramatic, just little things. I couldn't reach the top shelf anymore. The garden became too much to manage. The stairs creaked louder, or maybe my knees just did. David, my only son, began coming over more, helping with groceries, fixing the broken railing, making coffee just the way I liked it. "Mom, you shouldn't worry about these things," he'd say with that charming grin. "You took care of me all those years. Let me take care of you now." I smiled. I trusted him. So when he suggested that we put the house in both our names, just to make things easier, I didn't hesitate. "It's still your home, Mom. Nothing's changing. This is just a formality." So I signed. The pen shook in my hand, but not from doubt. From age, from love. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't think I needed to. That summer, he started handling more. Bills, maintenance, talking to the city when a tree limb needed removing. He became the man of the house, and I stepped aside with quiet pride. When I offered money for repairs, he always said, "No need. It's yours, Mom. Always will be." I baked him pies when he came by. His favorite, apple cinnamon, just like when he was 10. He never finished a full slice, but I didn't mind, because he was there, because he was helping, because I believed he loved me. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from my weekly knitting circle to find a stranger walking through my kitchen. A woman in high heels and a clipboard, talking on the phone and gesturing toward the cabinets. "Excuse me?" I asked, heart racing. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Margaret. Sorry, I thought this place was unoccupied during showings." "Showings?" Before I could make sense of it, she excused herself quickly. I stood in the doorway, the faint scent of her perfume lingering, and waited. Waited for David to explain. Waited for this to be a misunderstanding. But when I called him, his voice was stiff. "Mom, I was going to tell you, it's not what it looks like. It's complicated." But it wasn't complicated. It was betrayal. He had listed the house, our house, my home, the one I gave him access to out of trust. He had put it up for sale, behind my back. And the worst part? I had signed it away, with love. The locks that wouldn't turn, it happened on a Thursday. A breezy morning, the kind that used to call me into the garden with a pair of gloves and a basket for weeds. The air smelled faintly of lilacs from the neighbor's yard, and for a moment, everything felt normal. I had just returned from the corner bakery, a fresh loaf of sourdough in my tote bag, and 2 small apples for a crumble I had planned for the evening. I walked up the front steps, still humming the melody from the song playing in the store, and reached for my keys. That's when I knew something was wrong. The key didn't fit. I pulled it out. Tried again. Jiggled it like I'd done 100 times before. But it wouldn't turn. My heart stuttered. I moved to the back door. That one too wouldn't budge. I knocked, then knocked harder. No answer. I stood there, groceries digging into my elbow, trying to make sense of what was happening. My fingers trembled as I dialed David. No answer. The second call went to voicemail. By the third, I was sitting on the porch steps, blinking back the sting in my eyes. When he finally picked up, his voice was tight. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm at the house, David. My key doesn't work. What happened?" A pause, longer than it should have been. "Mom, the house is under contract. I had to change the locks. The realtor insisted. It's part of the agreement." "You changed the locks without telling me?" "It's complicated. The buyers want to close early, and they needed access. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" "I was going to talk to you about that. There's a place. It's temporary. It has great reviews. You'll be comfortable." Silence stretched between us like a bridge that had long since cracked. "You mean a nursing home?" I whispered. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just until we figure things out." I ended the call without another word. The world around me blurred. Not because I was dizzy, but because my heart had splintered. A neighbor, sweet Mrs. Lane, let me sit in her kitchen while I tried to make sense of it all. She poured me tea. I didn't drink it. "He changed the locks, Margaret?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I thought he loved this house. I thought it mattered to him." She didn't answer, just reached out and covered my hand with hers. Sometimes silence is kinder than false comfort. That night, I stayed in a room above the florist's shop, one of those places that rents by the week. The walls were paper thin. The bed creaked. The window didn't close properly. I lay awake until dawn, clutching the last photo I'd taken in the garden. Me and David, 2 summers ago, both smiling. I remember thinking, this is the version of him I want to remember forever. Now I barely recognize the man on the phone. The next day, David came by to talk. He looked tired, or maybe just uncomfortable. He brought coffee, like that would fix everything. It's not personal, Mom, you know that, right? Then what is it? I asked. A mistake? A business deal? Some kind of investment? It was just sitting there, Mom. You weren't using the whole house. You even said the upstairs was too much. I thought this would help. You could have some cash. Live somewhere easier. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I stared at him. You sold the home where I gave birth to you, where I buried your father, where I spent every penny to raise you when we had nothing. His jaw tightened. It's just a house. That sentence broke me. It wasn't just a house. It was Christmases spent wrapping gifts after midnight. It was the worn stair that creaked like a whisper of his childhood. It was where his father carved our initials into the back porch. It was my identity. My sanctuary, my sacrifice. I didn't speak to David again for weeks. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know who he was anymore. The temporary residence he found for me was clinical. Nice on the outside, empty on the inside. There were flower paintings on the wall, staff that smiled too wide. I heard another resident whisper, "That's the one whose son sold her house." I wanted to disappear. I began journaling. Day 1, my house is no longer mine. The air smells wrong. The sun hits the windows at the wrong angle. I keep thinking about the hydrangeas. Did they pull them out? Day 3, David texted me. I didn't answer. He said he left my teacup on the porch, the blue one with the crack, the one I used to drink from when I rocked him to sleep. Day 5. I woke up and didn't know where I was. I thought I was back in my room. Then I saw the sterile walls and remembered. Day 10. Ethan, my grandson, called me. He asked where the swing in the backyard went. I told him it was taken away, like everything else. One night I walked past the lobby and heard another resident crying. I sat with her. She didn't know my name, but she held my hand. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. Not truly. So many of us were here, hidden from the world that once promised to love us forever. And then forgot. I began to write not just for myself, but for others. I wrote letters to the house, to David, to the girl I used to be before motherhood taught me how to erase myself. Dear house, thank you for holding me together when the world didn't. Thank you for knowing my footsteps, my quiet weeping, my humming while baking. I miss you like I miss my youth, like I miss the version of my son who still needed me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. I had given everything to raise a man. And now I had to find the woman I used to be. The one who had dreams before sacrifices became my full-time job. The woman I remember being, it had been 17 days. 17 mornings of waking up in a bed that wasn't mine. 17 afternoons of looking out a window that didn't frame my old garden. 17 nights of remembering how easily everything I loved had been stripped away by a single signature, by my own hand. I used to believe I knew myself. But now I wasn't sure who I was without the house, without the routine, without the warmth of the kitchen I built and the creaky floorboards that knew the rhythm of my feet. And so I started digging, not through drawers or boxes, but through memory. Her name came to me slowly. Not someone I had forgotten, but someone I had buried under decades of sacrifice. She was the girl who used to paint, who danced barefoot on Sunday mornings in the living room, swirling in a thrift store dress while jazz records spun in the background. She was the young woman who said no with fire in her voice before life taught her that yes was more convenient. She was me. Before motherhood, before widowhood, before betrayal. Just me. I wrote her a letter. Dear Margaret, I miss you. I miss the way you used to scribble dreams into notebooks and doodle along the margins. I miss the way your laugh cracked wide open in theaters, and how you whispered poems to yourself in the grocery aisle just to keep your mind from feeling ordinary. You gave yourself away piece by piece. First to love, then to children, then to grief, and finally to duty. But I see you now. Even in these sterile walls, I feel you stretching, growing, returning. Come home, Margaret, to yourself. It wasn't easy, it never is. But I began to reclaim small things. A tube of lipstick in a deep plum shade. A record player from a thrift shop with a scratchy Billie Holiday album. A half-finished watercolor I found folded inside an old journal. Each one was a whisper. A reminder that I was more than a mother. more than someone's mistake. I was an artist, a storyteller, a survivor. Lily noticed the change first. She had returned to visit me, bringing with her the scent of lavender and old paperbacks. "You look different," she said, eyeing the splash of color on my lips. "I feel different," I said, not fixed, but less invisible. We spent hours talking. Not just about what had happened, but about what could happen next. "What do you want, Margaret?" she asked. It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in decades. And for once, I let myself answer honestly. I want a home that no one can take from me. I want peace, and maybe I want to feel proud of myself again. She smiled. "Then let's start there." We made lists, not grocery lists, but soul lists. Things I wanted to learn again. How to paint without apologizing. How to laugh without restraint. How to say no without guilt. How to trust myself again. I signed up for a senior art class at the community center. I joined a reading circle. I began volunteering in the facility's small garden, planting wildflowers in recycled pots. And each night I wrote letters. Not to David, not anymore, but to the woman I was becoming, the woman I had once been. One evening, I opened an old photo album. Inside was a photo from my 20s. I was standing at a lake, barefoot, with a notebook in one hand and a flower crown on my head. I looked wild, free, unapologetic, and for the first time in years, I whispered to the photo, "She's coming back, just you wait." The visit I didn't expect, it was raining. Not a heavy downpour, but a soft, steady drizzle. The kind of rain that made everything feel quieter, like the world was trying to whisper instead of speak. I sat by the window with a shawl around my shoulders, a half-empty mug of tea cooling beside me. The Billie Holiday record had finished playing half an hour ago, but I hadn't moved to flip it. Something in me felt suspended. Lily was supposed to come by that afternoon, but she had called to say her car wouldn't start. I didn't mind. I'd grown fond of the silence again, but now it wasn't suffocating. It was still, peaceful, until the knock came. 2 short taps, hesitant, then another, softer. My first thought was the nurse, or perhaps Mrs. Henley from the end of the hall. She often forgot where her room was. But when I opened the door, my breath caught. It was Ethan, my grandson, dripping wet, holding a small paper bag in one hand, his hood pushed back, and his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Shame. "Hi, Nana," he said. I couldn't speak. I ushered him in, grabbed a towel from the bathroom, and handed it to him. He toweled off his hair while I put on the kettle again. It was muscle memory by now. "How did you find me?" I asked. He looked down. "Mom told me. After everything happened, she thought I deserved to know. I didn't. Not really. I didn't know what to say. And now?" He exhaled slowly. "Now I just want to say something, even if it's late. Even if it doesn't fix anything." I brought him a cup of tea. He didn't drink it, but he wrapped his hands around it like it anchored him. "I didn't know Dad had sold the house until it was done," he said. "He told me he was handling things, that you were moving by choice, that it was all part of some plan." I listened. "Then I went to visit, to surprise you. And you were gone." A tear slipped down his cheek. "He told me you were settling in somewhere new. I believed him. I shouldn't have." "He's your father," I said gently. "That doesn't mean he's right." We sat there for a while. No words, just the sound of rain tapping against the window pane. Then he reached into the paper bag and pulled out something I hadn't seen in years. A ceramic mug. Cracked, chipped on one edge, hand-painted with a shaky little boy's handwriting that read, "Best Nana ever." "I found it in one of the boxes in the garage," he said. He was going to throw it away. My fingers brushed over the faded paint. The warmth of that little mug brought more comfort than any apology could. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for, Ethan." "I do. I disappeared. I let him tell me who you were instead of coming to see for myself. I never asked if you were okay. I should have." His voice cracked. "I miss you. I miss your garden, your pancakes, the way you used to tell stories with voices for every character." I smiled for the first time that day. "I miss you too." He stayed for hours. We talked about everything. His school, his dreams, his doubts, and slowly the scenes between us turned into something sacred. Before he left, he pulled a small notebook from his backpack. "I'm in an ethics class now. We're studying real-life dilemmas. I told them I had one. And I wrote about you." He handed me the notebook, inside a title. "When Love is Forgotten, the Story of My Nana." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because something else took its place. Hope. "Can I come back?" he asked at the door. "You never left," I whispered. The letter he didn't mean for me to see. It was a week after Ethan's visit when I found the letter. The morning had been particularly quiet. The rain had passed, leaving a soft mist hanging in the air and a grayness in the halls of the residence that made everything feel more fragile. Lily had come by earlier with a new scarf she'd knitted for me. Green, with flecks of gold. She said it brought out the color in my eyes, though I hadn't looked in a mirror long enough to agree. I was tidying the small corner where I kept my things. A desk, a few drawers, my journals, the shoebox of letters and photos I'd collected over the years. It was an ordinary act, mundane, something to feel useful, something to bring order. That's when I noticed the envelope. Plain, unmarked. Tucked between the pages of the ethics notebook Ethan had left behind. I hesitated, then opened it. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. David's. My son's. The ink had smudged in places like it had been written in a rush. Or in frustration. Perhaps both, I read. She gave me everything. I know that. And I know I didn't deserve most of it. But I was drowning, and she didn't see it. Maybe because she always saw me as her strong boy. Her capable one. I thought selling the house would save me. Would fix everything. Would give me room to breathe. But now I feel like I've thrown away more than walls. I think I sold something I can't ever get back. My son doesn't look at me the same. My wife sleeps further from me than she used to. And my mother, she looks at me like I'm a stranger. I don't know how to undo what I did. I don't even know if I should be forgiven. But I keep hearing her voice years ago telling me, it's okay to fall apart sometimes. That's how the light gets in. God, I hope she remembers she said that. Because I need her to believe it now. Even if I don't deserve it. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting in my lap, my fingers brushing the edges. It didn't excuse what he had done. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it was honest. And in a world where people often choose pride over truth, that meant something. That night, I placed the letter back in the notebook and put it in my drawer. I didn't call David, didn't write, but I whispered into the stillness. I remember, David, I remember everything. And for the first time, I meant it without pain. A few days later, Ethan returned. He brought with him a tray of muffins and a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. We ate. We laughed. He showed me a photo he had taken in photography class. A close-up of a cracked sidewalk with a single weed growing through. It reminded me of you, he said. Oh, old and full of cracks? I teased. He laughed. No, just still growing, no matter what. That night, I lit a candle on the windowsill. I didn't do it for prayer or hope. I did it for remembrance. For the woman I was. For the mother I became. For the man I raised. And the boy still learning to forgive. The offer that wasn't about guilt. It was a Thursday afternoon when David came. The rain had given way to a fragile kind of sunshine. The kind that spilled across windows like an apology. I was in the common room, seated by the piano no one played, working on a watercolor of a bird I had imagined more than seen. Its wings were crooked, its colors too bright, but I liked it that way. I didn't expect him. I hadn't heard from him since the letter. Hadn't even told him I'd seen it. But when I turned around and saw him standing there in the doorway, holding his coat like it might fly away if he didn't clutch it, I knew something had changed. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded. He followed me back to my room. We didn't speak until I closed the door. I came because I want to fix something. He began carefully. Not everything. I know better than to think I can. But something. Anything. He took a small envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. It's the proceeds from the house, your half. I looked at it but didn't touch it. He didn't have to. I know. I didn't do this because I had to. Or because I want to feel better. I did it because it was never mine. Not really. And because even if I lost your trust, I don't want to lose your presence too. We sat down. He looked older than I remembered. Maybe grief does that. Or shame. Do you know what I realized? He said quietly. That every time I walked into that house, it felt like yours. Even when the deed said otherwise. The walls whispered your name, the floorboards creaked your story, and I tried to erase it with signatures and locks, but it never left. Then why? I asked. Why did you do it anyway? He looked down. Because I was scared. Of money. Of failure. Of not being the man you raised me to be. And in trying to prove I was in control, I destroyed the only place where I was truly loved without needing to earn it. I reached for the watercolor, held it up. What do you see? He tilted his head. A bird with a crooked wing. It can't fly right, I said, but it still tries, still soars even if unevenly. That's me. That's you. He smiled, small and broken. So what now? He asked. Now, I said, we begin again. But this time we build something no one can sell. He opened the envelope and pulled out something else. Not money, not documents. A brochure. It's for a small cottage just outside the city. 1 floor, garden space, affordable. In your name only. I looked at him. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to help you buy it. Not to make up for anything. Not because I'm sorry, but because I believe you deserve a place again. A home. One that's yours to fill, or leave, or lock, on your terms. Tears welled up. Not because of the offer, but because of the shift. He wasn't coming as a fixer, he was coming as a son. We didn't decide that day, but we walked to the garden outside and sat on a bench. We talked about Ethan, about Diane, about memories that used to live in the rooms of a house now owned by strangers. Maybe the house was never the point, I said. Maybe it was just the place where the real things happened. The love, the mistakes, the forgiveness. And those don't need walls, David replied. I took his hand, held it gently. Thank you, I said. Not for the money, MD, not for the house, but for the courage. To come back, to own his choices. To see me, not just as a mother, but as a woman with a soul worth honoring. That night, I painted a new bird. Stronger, wings outstretched, but still crooked. Because healing doesn't erase the cracks. It just teaches us how to carry them. The day I walked into my new home, the morning sun cast a gentle glow over the quaint cottage that was to be my new home. Dew glistened on the grass, and the air was filled with the fresh scent of earth and promise. As the moving truck pulled up to the gate, I stood for a moment taking it all in. The red-tiled roof, the inviting front porch, and the garden brimming with potential. David stepped out of the driver's seat, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. Ready, Mom? ACM Digital Library plus 15. Facts Set Insight. Plus 15. The Guardian plus 15. I nodded, emotions swirling within me. This wasn't just a house, it was a new beginning. A canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of new memories. Crossing the threshold, I was enveloped by a sense of warmth and possibility. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dancing across the polished wooden floors. The rooms were empty, yet I could already envision cozy evenings by the fireplace, mornings filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and afternoons tending to the garden. David carried in the first of the boxes, setting it down gently. Where should we start? I glanced around, then smiled. Let's begin with the garden. I've always believed that a true home starts with the things we nurture and grow. We spent the morning clearing and preparing the garden beds. The soil was rich and eager, ready to embrace the seeds of tomorrow. David helped me outline spaces for roses, lavender, and the herbs I love to cook with. Thyme, +1. The Guardian, +1. As we worked, Ethan arrived, a potted chrysanthemum in hand. ACM Digital Library. Grandma, I brought you this. It symbolizes new beginnings. Tears welled up as I hugged my grandson tightly. In that moment, I realized that a home isn't defined by its walls, but by the love and memories shared within them. By afternoon, as the sun began its descent, we sat on the porch sipping tea and sharing stories. Laughter echoed, bridging the gaps that time and pain had carved. Are you happy, Mom? David's voice was tentative, hopeful. I met his gaze, seeing the man he'd become, the son I'd always loved. Yes, David, I am. Because I've learned that home is wherever family gathers and love resides. Ethan chimed in, grinning mischievously. So, when's the housewarming party? I've heard Grandma's apple pie is legendary. We all laughed, the sound a melody of healing and hope. I knew then that this new chapter would be filled with moments to cherish. Arsiv. That night, as I lay in my new bed, I stared at the ceiling, gratitude filling every corner of my heart. The past had shaped me, but it did not define me. It was the choices I made now, the love I embraced, that would chart the course ahead. Closing my eyes, I drifted into a peaceful sleep, ready to welcome the days to come with an open heart and unwavering spirit. The first days in my new home. The morning sun filtered gently through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the wooden floor. I sat at the small kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea cradled in my hands, and took a moment to absorb the serenity of my new surroundings. The cottage, though modest, exuded a warmth that felt both comforting and invigorating. The walls, freshly painted in a soft cream hue, awaited personal touches. Boxes labeled with memories from the past stood stacked in the corner, patiently waiting to be unpacked. Yet there was no rush. For the first time in a long while, I felt no pressure, no looming deadlines, only the gentle embrace of possibility. Ethan arrived mid-morning, his youthful energy filling the space as he carried in a potted plant, a vibrant green fern. "Thought this place could use a bit of greenery, Nana," he said with a grin. I hugged him tightly, the familiar scent of his shampoo bringing back a flood of cherished memories. "It's perfect, Ethan, thank you." Together, we found a spot for the fern by the window, where it could bask in the sunlight. As we arranged furniture and unpacked essentials, we chatted about everything and nothing: school, his friends, the latest book he was reading. The ease of our conversation was a balm to my soul, reaffirming the bond that time and circumstance could never sever. In the afternoon, David stopped by with a toolbox in hand. Thought I could help hang some pictures or fix anything that needs fixing, he offered, a tentative smile playing on his lips. I nodded, emotion swelling in my chest. I'd like that very much. We worked side by side, placing familiar photographs on the walls, snapshots of birthdays, holidays, and candid moments that told the story of our family. With each nail hammered and frame hung, the cottage transformed from a house into a home. As evening approached, we gathered around the small dining table, sharing a simple meal of soup and freshly baked bread. Laughter and conversation flowed freely, filling the space with a warmth that no amount of decor could replicate. "To new beginnings," David toasted. Sayum, Sandetsted, raising his glass. We clinked our glasses together, the unspoken understanding passing between us that while the past could not be changed, the future was ours to shape. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the house had settled into a peaceful quiet, I stood by the window, gazing out at the moonlit garden. The fern sat proudly on the windowsill, a symbol of resilience and growth. I realized that this cottage was more than just a place to live. It was a testament to forgiveness, to the enduring strength of family, and to the beauty of starting anew. The walls might be new, but the love that filled them was deeply rooted in years of shared experiences. With a contented sigh, I turned off the lights and made my way to bed, heart full and spirit renewed, ready to embrace the days to come in my new home. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.